Think about the last time someone hurt you, said something careless, crossed a line, broke trust, and then nothing, no apology, no acknowledgement, just silence. And what hurt the most wasn't the mistake itself. It was what that silence made you wonder. Did I matter? Did they even notice the damage? Or was I just invisible? Here's what most of us don't realize. When people refuse to apologize, it's rarely because they don't know they caused harm. It's because apologizing would force them to face something deeply uncomfortable about themselves. And that avoidance, it tells us a lot, not just about them, but about how we should protect our hearts, set boundaries, and stop carrying shame that was never ours to begin with. Apologizing requires vulnerability, and not everyone has learned how to be vulnerable. I want to slow this down for a moment because on the surface, an apology sounds simple. 2 words, I'm sorry. But emotionally, an apology asks us to do something far more demanding. It asks us to step out of self-protection and into exposure. It asks us to say, I see the impact of what I did, and I'm willing to be seen in my imperfection. And for a lot of people, that feels unbearable. Here's what I've learned through research and years of listening to people talk about shame and belonging. Vulnerability is not an instinct. It's a skill. And skills have to be taught, practiced, and modeled. If you grew up in an environment where mistakes were met with punishment, ridicule, or withdrawal of love, vulnerability didn't feel brave, it felt dangerous. So your nervous system learned something very early. Hide, defend, don't admit fault. Now fast forward to adulthood. Someone says, you hurt me. And instead of hearing an invitation to repair, the body hears a threat. Heart rate goes up. The mind scrambles. And suddenly, the goal isn't connection, it's survival. So when someone refuses to apologize, it's often not because they don't care. It's because apologizing would require them to sit with shame they've never learned how to metabolize. Shame says, if I admit this, I am bad, I am broken, I am unworthy of belonging. And when shame is driving, accountability feels like self-destruction. I also want to be really clear about this. Vulnerability without safety is not courage. If someone has never experienced relationships where accountability led to repair instead of rejection, they don't have a roadmap for what comes after I'm sorry. All they can imagine is loss. And so they avoid, they minimize, they explain, they go quiet. Not because they're calculating or cruel, but because their internal system is overloaded. This is why telling people to just apologize often doesn't work. We're asking for behavior that requires emotional tools they may never have been given. And understanding that doesn't mean we excuse the harm. It means we stop personalizing the silence. Because here's the quiet truth underneath all of this. When someone cannot be vulnerable enough to apologize, they are telling you where their growth stopped. They are showing you the edge of their emotional capacity. And that awareness matters. It changes how much you chase closure, how much you explain yourself, and how much responsibility you stop carrying that was never yours to hold. Some people associate apologizing with losing power. This belief runs deep, and it often hides in places we don't immediately recognize as fear. For some people, power is not about influence or leadership or respect. Power is about control. It's about staying upright, unchallenged, and untouched by criticism. And in that framework, an apology doesn't feel like integrity. It feels like surrender. I've heard people say things like, if I apologize, they'll think they can walk all over me. Or if I admit I was wrong, I lose my authority. And what's underneath those statements is not confidence. It's a fragile sense of self that depends on always being right. When identity is built on dominance instead of worthiness, being wrong feels like disappearing. Here's what the research shows us about this. When people tie their self-worth to control, any challenge to their behavior registers as a threat to their identity. The nervous system responds accordingly. Fight, deflect, reframe, double down, and apologizing, which requires slowing down, listening, and taking responsibility, feels like handing over the steering wheel. I want to pause here because this is where many of us get stuck. We look at someone's refusal to apologize and we interpret it as arrogance. And sometimes, yes, there is entitlement at play. But very often, what we're witnessing is fear masquerading as strength, a belief system that says, if I soften, I will be overtaken. For people who grew up in environments where power was uneven, where authority meant safety and vulnerability meant exposure, apologizing feels like stepping off a ledge. They learned that control kept them protected. So even when they care, even when they know harm was done, they cling to control because it feels like the only thing standing between them and chaos. And here's the paradox. Real power is not diminished by accountability. It's strengthened by it. Trust grows when people can say, I missed that, I got it wrong, I'm listening now. But if someone has never experienced power as something that can coexist with humility, they won't know that. All they know is the version of power that must be defended at all costs. So instead of repair, they choose distance. Instead of apology, they choose silence or justification. Not because they're trying to punish you, but because they're trying to protect themselves. And this is where the shift happens for us. When we understand that someone's refusal to apologize is about their relationship with power and not our worth, we stop begging for accountability from people who experience it as a threat. We begin to see the behavior clearly, and clarity gives us choices, because when power matters more than connection, that's not a misunderstanding. That's a boundary. Defensiveness is often unresolved shame in disguise. This is one of the hardest truths to sit with, because defensiveness looks loud and sharp on the outside, while shame is quiet and heavy on the inside. When someone responds to being confronted with excuses, blame shifting, or a long list of reasons why it wasn't really their fault, it can feel dismissive, even cruel. But when I slow this down and look beneath the behavior, what I often see is a person who feels deeply threatened by the possibility of being seen as flawed. Shame has a very specific message. It says, I am bad. Not, I did something bad, but I am bad. And when that belief is activated, the nervous system doesn't move toward curiosity or accountability. It moves toward self-protection. Defensiveness becomes a shield, not to win an argument, but to survive an emotional experience that feels unbearable. I want to be clear about something here. Shame is not the same as guilt. Guilt says, I did something wrong and I want to fix it. Shame says, there is something wrong with me and I must hide it. Research consistently shows that guilt supports repair and accountability, while shame shuts both of them down. So when someone becomes defensive instead of reflective, we're not watching confidence in action. We're watching a system overwhelmed by self-judgment. This is why defensiveness often escalates so quickly. A simple statement like, that hurt me, can suddenly turn into a debate about intent, memory, or tone. Not because the person wants to avoid responsibility, but because shame has hijacked the conversation. The goal shifts from understanding impact to protecting identity. And here's where it gets complicated for those of us on the receiving end. When someone gets defensive, we often feel tempted to push harder, to explain more, to gather evidence, to prove our pain is valid. But shame doesn't soften under pressure. It calcifies. The more threatened someone feels, the more rigid their defenses become. For many people, defensiveness was learned early. Maybe admitting mistakes led to humiliation. Maybe accountability was met with rejection. Maybe being wrong meant losing love or safety. So the body learned a rule, never be at fault. And that rule becomes automatic, even when it costs connection. Understanding this doesn't mean we excuse harmful behavior. It means we stop expecting accountability from a place where shame is running the show. Because accountability requires self-compassion. It requires the belief that you can make a mistake and still be worthy of belonging. When someone can't access that belief, defensiveness will always feel safer than repair. And recognizing that truth helps us step out of the cycle where we chase understanding and they fortify their armor, and instead choose clarity, boundaries, and self-respect. Many people were never taught how to repair relationships. This is one of those truths that feels simple when we say it out loud and heavy when we really let it land. because we tend to assume that adults know how to apologize, how to take responsibility, how to make things right, but repair is not automatic. It's learned, and for a lot of people, it was never modeled in a way that felt safe, consistent, or genuine. If you grew up in a home where mistakes were punished instead of explored, repair didn't look like a conversation. It looked like consequences, silence, distance, sometimes shame. You learned very quickly that the goal wasn't understanding what went wrong, but avoiding getting caught. And in those environments, saying, "I'm sorry," wasn't about empathy or accountability. It was about appeasement. It was about ending the discomfort as fast as possible. So people learned how to comply, not how to connect. Others grew up in families where conflict was ignored entirely. No one named the hurt. No one circled back. Things just moved on. And the unspoken lesson there was that relationships survive by pretending nothing happened. That discomfort is something to outrun, not resolve. So as adults, when tension arises, they freeze or disappear, not because they don't care, but because they genuinely don't know what repair is supposed to look like. Repair also requires language. It requires being able to say, "Here's what I did, here's how it landed, here's what I'll do differently." And if no one ever offered you that script, if no one ever showed you that accountability could strengthen a relationship instead of ending it, you're left improvising in moments of emotional intensity. And most people default to what kept them safe before. This is where I want us to be both compassionate and clear. Not knowing how to repair does not mean the harm didn't matter. It means the person causing harm may be operating with an incomplete toolkit. And incomplete toolkits lead to incomplete apologies, or none at all. What research and experience tell us is that repair is one of the strongest predictors of relational trust. Not perfection, not getting it right the first time. Repair. But if someone has never seen repair modeled, they don't know that trust can actually deepen after rupture. All they know is that conflict leads to loss. So they avoid it, they minimize it, they hope time will erase it. And for those of us on the other side of that pattern, this understanding can be sobering because it explains the behavior, but it doesn't change it. Awareness doesn't magically give someone skills they never learned. And that's where discernment comes in. When someone consistently avoids repair, they're showing you not just what they didn't learn, but what they're not yet willing to learn. And that matters when you're deciding how much access they have to your life and your heart. A refusal to apologize shows you the limits of someone's emotional capacity. This is the point where everything we've talked about comes together. And it's also the one we tend to resist the most, because it asks us to stop hoping that more explaining, more patience, or more empathy will eventually unlock accountability in someone else. And that's a hard letting go, especially if you care deeply, especially if you've been telling yourself that if they just understood, things would change. But here's what I've learned. When someone consistently refuses to apologize, they are giving you information, not an opinion, not a mood, information. They are showing you how much discomfort they can tolerate, how much responsibility they can hold, and how far they can go emotionally without shutting down. Emotional capacity is about bandwidth. It's the ability to stay present when things get uncomfortable, to hear about impact without collapsing into shame or defensiveness, to remain connected while taking responsibility. And not everyone has that capacity, at least not yet. Some people can love deeply, show up generously, and still be unable to face the pain they cause. That contradiction is real, and it's confusing, and it's where many of us get stuck. We tell ourselves that if we can just say it the right way, choose the right moment, or soften our needs enough, the apology will come. But capacity doesn't expand through persuasion. It expands through willingness and work, and that work has to be chosen. When someone reaches the edge of their emotional capacity, they don't lean in. They shut down, deflect, or disappear. Not because they want to hurt you, but because they literally do not have the internal resources to stay engaged. And expecting them to operate beyond that limit keeps us locked in a cycle of disappointment. This is where boundaries stop being punishments and start being acts of self-respect. When you recognize someone's limits, you can stop asking them to give what they cannot give. You can stop waiting for a repair that requires tools they don't have or aren't willing to build. And I want to say this gently because it matters. Understanding someone's limits does not mean you minimize your pain. It means you stop negotiating your worth. You stop internalizing their inability to apologize as evidence that you're asking for too much. Often, the most compassionate thing we can do for ourselves and for the relationship is to accept what is being shown, not what we wish were true. That acceptance brings clarity. And clarity, while sometimes painful, is incredibly freeing. Because once you see the limits clearly, you can decide what level of closeness feels safe, what expectations need to change, and where you need to protect your heart. And in that clarity, you reclaim something essential: the freedom to stop chasing accountability and start choosing yourself. And as you carry this with you, I want to leave you with this. You don't need to convince anyone to be accountable in order to be worthy of care. You don't need an apology to validate your pain. And you don't need someone else's courage to claim your own clarity. Understanding why some people won't apologize doesn't mean you stay where repair isn't possible. It means you walk forward with open eyes, steady boundaries, and a deeper trust in yourself. So good luck. Not in changing anyone else, but in honoring what you now see. Good luck in choosing relationships that can hold honesty, humility, and repair. And good luck in continuing to show up with courage, even when others cannot.